Kia ora and welcome to whānau. It's my pleasure to introduce Charlie Rahiri, who is actually the manager of Te Puna Kokiri here in Tauranga. But Chani is of Nai Tamarawaho, which of course is the mana whenua of this rohi here. So he's one of the people of this particular area of land. Kia ora and thanks.
Ka te tēnā koutou, kei aku rangatira kei Wainganui a tātou, tēnā tātou katoa, kia inoi tātou. Nō reira mā te mari a te atua tātou katoa e tiaki, tuku a tau wairua tapu, hei arehi, hei painga mō tātou. Homaira ai koe, tō whakapono, wairua tapu whakaro pai, whakatongi au manakitanga, ki runga kia mātou kua karahuihui mai, whakatūwhera mai tēnei huihuinga, i raro i tō manakitanga, ko koe te arepa, te omeka, te kaha me te kloria, mo ake tonu ake, amine. Kia ora.
Folks, before we start, just a couple of introductions, and can I just thank you for being here. We are going to videotape this, this event tonight because there are many people who wanted to be here, who can't be here, and so we will have on social media, and I'm sure other channels, a video by sort of midday tomorrow or thereabouts available for those that can't be here. I want to introduce Mayor Garry Webber from the Western Bay Plenty District Council. One of the fundamental changes that you might have seen post the elections in October is that Garry and I, together with Doug Leader, the chairman of the Bay Plenty Regional Council, are working very closely together on a range of things, which is really part of my post-mayoral, if you will, philosophy of kotahitanga, which is together, unity, working together, bringing communities together as we are here tonight. So Garry, it's great to have you here. Thank you. Inspector Clifford Paxton, the District Commander of the Western Bay Plenty Police. Clifford has been living and breathing this for some time, and he has been a wealth of information to us and a great advisor and mentor to me personally around these issues, which are not easy. None of us are well acquainted with these issues, and Clifford's been a wonderful advisor. And Simon EVERITT, ladies and gentlemen, the Chief Executive of the Bay of Plenty District Health Board. Great to have you here, Simon. Thank you very much. Simon is going to talk about the health impacts of some of the issues that we're facing. And I'd also like to acknowledge that there are members, board members of the Bay of Plenty DHB here tonight. Thank you for coming, and of course, you're very welcome. I'd also like to acknowledge the chairs and chief executives of the three iwis who are here, Ngāi Tarangi Nui, and Ngāti Pukenga, the three iwis of Tauranga Moana. It is wonderful to have you here, and as well as Charlie from Te Puna Kokiri, I'd like to acknowledge Mi Kihan, who is the a senior manager here in Tauranga. So, and of course, the TCC staff and the Western Bay Plenty staff that are here, thank you for making this possible and for getting this underway so very quickly. So why are we here? I think we're here for a number of reasons. I think we're here for understanding. The dynamics of gangs in New Zealand have changed. It is not just here in Tauranga. It's changed remarkably. And we've talked, I think, well, I feel like I have talked an awful lot to various media agencies about the dynamics of that change, which are the 501s, so-called, the deportees, those who have been deported from Australia, having served a custodial sentence for a crime, and then under 501 of the Australian Immigration Act have deemed not to have the right character to continue to live in Australia. And they have been deported to New Zealand. In some cases, a land that they have no knowledge of. They may have left with their parents at a very, very young age, and they find themselves now back in a country with really very few ties. And I'm sure Clifford will elaborate on that a bit during his speech. They bring with them a level of sophistication that we haven't seen here previously. They bring with them international contacts with the South American drug gangs, with the Chinese triad gangs, and with that comes a level of violence that we haven't seen in quite this way ever before in New Zealand. And I emphasise New Zealand. Yes, we are dealing with it here today in Tauranga. This is a New Zealand issue. And fundamentally, we're dealing with a meth issue. This is the distribution of meth. This is, to be crude about it, a turf war. This is finding space in a small place. Yes, we are New Zealand's 5th largest city, New Zealand's fastest growing city, all those things. But we are a very small city in the scheme. And there's not enough room for everybody, and there's all this uncomfortable jostling around for space right now, which is causing a bit of angst. And Clifford, I'm sure, will paint more colour into that statement. The question is, how do we deal with it? And people would say to me, well, you know, what's the point of getting everybody together? What's the point of a hui of this thought? Well, the point of a hui is exactly that we are the community who live among all this. And I think we need to also acknowledge that gangs come from our community. They are members of our community too. And I don't know if there's any gang members here, and if there are, we'd like to hear from you at some stage, for sure. In sort of a measured and sensible way, as I ask you all to be tonight. To keep to topic and to talk about the issues that we have to contend with. Because this is about understanding. This is about empathy, and this is fundamentally about your safety. And before I finish, and that's really all I'm going to do prior to introducing Clifford to the podium here, is that I take my hat off to Clifford and his team with the New Zealand Police. We are blessed to have a calibre of police force that we have under Clifford's command. They are world class. And so without further ado, Clifford, if I could invite you to the stage. Thank you very much.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui ki koutou katoa, ki te atua tēnā koe, ki patunuku tēnā koe, ki te whare tēnā koe, ki te haere mātei, ki te haere ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko au te kai whakahari o ngā pirimana o Tauranga wana, ko Clifford Paxton ahau. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Evening all, thanks very much for the opportunity to come along here this evening and speak to you all. Before I start, can I just please acknowledge Mayor Tenby Powell, Mayor Garry Acting CEO of the Bay of Plenty District Health Board, Simon Everett. Thanks very much for the opportunity here this evening. And thank you all for coming along this evening, giving up your time to come along and contribute to this cordial. So the topics I've been asked to speak to tonight is what's changed, what's behind the gang violence in the Western Bay of Plenty, what's happening right now, what are the police doing to protect public safety, and where do we see this going from here? Perhaps before I start the conversation, can I please give a little bit of context to this cordial tonight? First and foremost, I'm the Area Commander of Western Bay of Plenty Police. My role is one of a generalist nature. I'm no way a gang expert. Principally, I'm here to provide an explanation and hopefully some reassurance to our communities here in the Western Bay of Plenty. I hope you'll understand that I need to walk a fine line tonight between trying to keep our communities informed, provide some reassurance, but at the same time ensuring I don't jeopardise the investigations and court processes that are currently underway. I also need to make it clear that I'm speaking wider than just the matters recently referenced. What I'm speaking about pertains to the wider gang environment in the Western Bay of Plenty, or at least certain sectors of it as it currently stands. From my perspective, it would be somewhat naive or unwise to think that what has happened recently represents the full extent of the criminal environment in the Western Bay of Plenty. Therefore, I'd ask that we keep our thinking wide and future-focused, rather than just looking to the past for any answers. I'll also ask you to be cognizant of the fact that I'm talking about gang entities. I'm not talking about individuals in a gang. They, just like police, are individuals. And to generalise that each individual is a mirror image of the entity is not factually correct. You also note that there have been various reports in the papers, various experts and various opinions. I'm not here to validate those reports or otherwise, but perhaps to provide a perspective as to how I see it. I'm mindful that there will be varying degrees of knowledge with those here tonight. As Iwi said to me recently, for some the criminal environment will be very strong, for others not so. I'm also mindful that some here tonight may be in gangs or have whānau or associates in gangs. So I'm mindful to not intentionally demonise gangs or gang members, but more in terms of trying to provide an explanation. So what's changed? In essence, if we use the analogy of a business and another business with the same competing business motives moves in next door, you're always going to have tension. Now, we would hope that those business owners would get around the table and court it all. Clearly, that's not happening. So we have an escalating situation where the business owners aren't talking. The environment has changed because you've brought different players to the table. Each is going to have to match the other in order to try and get some sort of equilibrium. The problem hasn't gone away. Now, during the normal course of events, we don't see business owners walking out their front doors threatening each other with weapons, frightening our communities. Unfortunately, we can't say the same for the current situation in the Western Bay of Plenty. The point I make at this stage, however, is the issue is between the store owners, not extended members of the community. So the question is, has the tension dissipated? The answer from my perspective is no. We're yet to see a rebalancing of the situation which will bring the matter back into equilibrium. I saw one commentator recently refer to it as growing pains. There is no agreement in place that we're aware of which will dictate how these groups will conduct themselves in the future. That makes the situation highly volatile. Clearly, when someone walks out of their shop front carrying a weapon, our approach is one of immediate response. That will be of no surprise to any of you. Store owners don't like police parked outside their shop front. It's bad for business. Where tension exists, we'll continue this approach until tension subsides. Running parallel to this is our investigative processes, which continue whether or not any agreement or equilibrium is reached. One would suggest the way business or the way these groups have traditionally done business is clearly very different from the operating environment here today. At the strategic level, we continue with the plan on how we're going to respond to organised crime. That plan involves many different work groups at the national, district and area level. Further resources have been put into organised crime at the area level, along with repurposing one of our groups to focus on high-risk, wanted individuals. There's little point in doing a whole lot of investigative work if we aren't going to hold offenders to account. We're well supported at the national level with both the National Organised Crime Group and Asset Recovery here in the Western Bay of Plenty. Each of our staff have a role, whether it's the road policing groups focusing on noisy vehicles, criminal investigation branch focusing on investigating offenders, or public safety teams focusing on matters of public interest. But like any plan, it needs to be enacted. Having witnessed the All Blacks in the recent World Cup, I'm hopeful our plan may be a little bit more successful. The challenge, as always, though, is in freeing up our people to ensure they are match fit to execute the plan. That means we need to prioritise some things, triage some things, and make sure our resource is where it is needed. Clearly, matters involving public safety or loss of life will be treated as high priority. The question was also asked, where do I see this going? This tension still exists and will exist until some equilibrium can be found. I suspect when we say we're yet to see a rebalancing of the situation which will bring the matter back into equilibrium, some will automatically think about the importation, manufacture and distribution of drugs. Methamphetamine, cocaine, ecstasy, synthetics are some of the activities some of these groups are involved in. But again, I think it's much wider than that. It's about how businesses exist and operate in an environment, and that occurs at multiple levels. Some of these groups have strong familial links into the community and even within and between gangs. Some of this rebalancing or bringing back into equilibrium will be very much at the relationship level. I know for some it will be front of mind, how do we move these enterprises or groups from where they are currently to something that can add value or contribute more positively to society? Again, I'm sure they'll tell you that their being is different from that which I'm suggesting. But coming back to the analogy of business, these enterprises are big business, and trying to move or shift an entire enterprise would be a monumental undertaking, with all its franchises and national and international links. We should, however, be open to helping those in these groups that are wanting to change, to transition from the current state or the situation that they're in to something different. Whilst I'm open to this, whether it be police-led or otherwise, clearly our community have a role in this. Helping people to be their best is something we should all strive for. I suspect there'll also be questions of why the Western Bay of Plenty, and I look at it this way. Again, if you use the business analogy, for businesses to be successful, there needs to be the ability to import goods. There needs to be the ability to manufacture goods for sale. There needs to be good distribution networks. There needs to be a market. You have to have a ready supply of resources to import, manufacture and distribute those goods. Unfortunately, from where I sit in the Western Bay of Plenty, it seems to offer all of those opportunities and more. It's also a reasonably affluent area. No doubt people will be thinking, what more can be done? Using the business analogy, businesses require wealth to grow, to proliferate and for monopolies to form. You either need to restrict wealth creation or remove wealth generated to prevent proliferation or for monopolies forming. If there is no money in it, it is no longer attractive. There remains both the challenge and the opportunity. I'm sure there'll be others that will tell you it's not about the money, it's about the brotherhood. That might be the case, but it's illegal offending to generate wealth and the violence associated with that comes to our attention. I appreciate all your time here tonight, and I hope I've given you some small insight into the environment we're currently operating in. If I could please just close with 4 things. We could ask our communities to remain calm, to remain vigilant, to remove yourself from the situation, to report what you see, and to keep yourselves and your families safe. Nā reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Clifford. Thank you very much. Now, I'm sure there's going to be many questions, and there's ample opportunity for you to ask questions. We've got roving mics, and once Simon's spoken, we will enable you to ask those questions. As I said earlier, it's great to have Simon here from the District Health Board, the Bay of Plenty District Health Board. I've been quoted as saying, and I do stand by this, that until we cut the head off the meth monster, we will still have this issue in New Zealand. And it's fair to say that port cities like Tauranga are probably more affected than some. I don't know if that's entirely true, but certainly in terms of importation of meth into the country, it stands to reason that they come in through the port. I do know we have great security operations here at the port, and we are going to talk to the port about things that we might be able to do to augment it. The reality is, though, we have a very long and hard to police coastline here in New Zealand. It's extremely difficult. And the work that's being done on that, while good, I think needs to be better resourced. And I've said that to central government. Until we address the supply side, it's very hard to manage the demand side. We're blessed here in Tauranga Moana to have had announced recently that we will have 2 new mental health facilities, in the Bay of Plenty, I beg your pardon, one here in Tauranga and one at Whakatane, coming at some stage in the near future. We desperately need that, there's no doubt about that, and that will help, among other things, to address the demand side, as well as education, and as well as a range of programs. That's all very fine. I truly believe until we address the supply side, which is the weight of methamphetamine that comes into this country, we are going to struggle with managing the demand side. People would say to me, it's extremely expensive to address the demand side. You know, it's resource intensive, it costs so much money. My response to that is that meth is destroying the fabric of our society. It's destroying the fabric of New Zealand society. Until we resource the supply side and capture the majority that's coming in, we will always have these issues. So I'm very keen to hear from Simon, and thank you again, Simon, for coming and talking to us tonight around the impact of the health issues. Ladies and gentlemen, Simon Everett.
Kia ora everyone, thank you for being here this evening. My name's Simon Everett, I'm the Interim Chief Executive of the Bay of Plenty District Health Board, and just like to acknowledge Clifford, Garry and Tenby, and thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm going to make a few brief comments on some of the trends that we've been seeing as a health system across the Bay of Plenty as context for this broader discussion around violence in our communities. One of the challenges that we've been seeing as a health system is an increasing level of violence or threats towards our doctors, nurses, allied health staff and non-clinical staff providing care for our patients. Over the past year, as an example, we had 217 reported cases of verbal, physical or threatening behaviours towards the health professionals and support staff who are trying to provide care for our sick and most vulnerable. Some of these incidents are related to patients with medical or other conditions, but other causal factors relate to altered mental state, the influence of alcohol and drugs, and aggressive behaviours by family members. As Chief Executive, this is unacceptable and putting staff in harm's way when they're doing their very best to care for patients, and it's not on. We are doing everything we can to manage this, including staff training programs, temporary placement of additional security resources, and other changes to our physical environment to protect our staff. However, this is a much bigger problem than just the health system to resolve, and is going to require significant behavioural and attitudinal changes from our community. As a District Health Board, we also provide a violence intervention program which screens patients coming into the hospital who may be experiencing violence in the home. Another trend we are seeing is an increase in the complexity of people presenting, often with significant issues of violence and drug abuse, with other risks, which are really impacting negatively on our families and whānau. As further evidence of the challenges we are facing regarding violence in our communities, the Ministry of Justice released on Monday the New Zealand Crime and Victims Survey, which reflects that 79,000 adults in New Zealand experience one or more violent offences by a family member. Furthermore, there's a strong relationship between family violence and the influence of alcohol and drugs. We also know the health impacts on people that experience violence is significant, with victims experiencing moderate to high levels of psychological stress. As a health system, we're here to help provide help, care and support for people who may need assistance as a result of the impacts on their lives of alcohol or drugs. Bay of Plenty District Health Board funds a number of community-based alcohol and other drug services across the community that incorporate a range of service delivery approaches to ensure that there is choice for people that need to seek help for addiction difficulties. We also fund a number of residential AOD services, which can include pre- and post-residential care and supporting detox options, both medical and in the community. We are, however, seeing an increase in the number of people seeking residential treatment for methamphetamine addiction as their primary presenting problem. We are aware of the community's concerns about access to local residential services, and we're in early discussions about future residential care options in the Tauranga region. In summary, as a health system, we're experiencing all of the negative impacts of increasing violence in our community. These impacts span from the broader, more fundamental increase in demand on our health services, helping patients recover and rehabilitate, to the very personal and often confrontational impact on our own staff members providing care on the front line. The challenges of violence and increasing substance abuse in our community are much bigger than the health systems to resolve, and is going to require a concerted community and multi-agency response to make a difference. I would suggest one way forward is for the community to develop some shared values or a vision of what well-being means for them, and then supporting agencies like ours to resource and partner to achieve that vision. Thanks for taking the time to listen this evening. Kia ora.
Thank you, Simon. That made perfect sense. So, this is your time. We have some roving microphones somewhere. I'm sure they'll appear miraculously. To Simon's point, the multi-agency thing is really, really important. And here we are with the Western, or TCC, with the Western Bay of Plenty District Council, with police, with the DHB, with Te Puna Kokiri, with all three iwi represented at the most senior of levels. This whole concept of coming together, of unity, of kotahitanga is going to be very important as we go forward. And with that in mind, I ask you to frame your questions in that way. We're not looking for throwing retribution, we're not looking to blame, we're looking to understand and empathise and come up with some solutions. We are really keen to hear about your ideas as to what those solutions could be. So, over to you. If you put your hand up, we've got a number of people who are roving around with mics. And please feel free to address your questions to any of us. You, I'm sure, want to talk to Clifford and Simon far more than Garry and I, so we won't take offence.
Hi, I just first of all want to say thanks, Tenby, for organising this, and hats off to the policemen in our community for looking out for us. I guess you're looking at a very holistic point of view, and your business analogy was we're almost enabling them. Can we go to central government? Why are we allowing these people into the country in the first place? And that's one aside. But if we are going to take your approach of, working alongside them, can we look at ways of perhaps somehow phasing out gangs? I know that would be a long process, but the point is the drugs are here. That's what's making the money. That's what's creating a lot more of our health problems with our, for our communities. And I appreciate we have to include everyone and be nice and a little bit more PC. But ultimately, the problem is letting the drugs in, and then also allowing the gang members into the country. So I think my question is, how can we stop gangs, or can we phase out gangs somehow? And I know it's a long process because my brother-in-law has been working with one of his young employees who's been in a gang, and it's taken 2 years for him to be removed from the gangs. It took a long process meeting with the gangs to actually get out. He wanted to get out. So how can we enable something like that to happen?
So your question is, how can we, if possible, phase out gangs?
Yeah, yes.
Clifford, is this to Clifford? I don't want to put you in the hot seat, but...
Look, I think there's probably actually some gang members that could speak to this a lot better than me, but I always look at it in terms of a social need. Gangs at the end of the day are fulfilling a social need. Now, whether it's a need for connectedness, a need for a brotherhood, whatever the case may be, they are fulfilling a need. And yes, they are a big business, and that's how they make their money. But fundamentally, at the heart of all that, they're fulfilling a need. So we need to find ways, or other ways, that can fulfill the sorts of needs that those gangs are fulfilling at the moment. And we had a meeting with iwi just recently, and nice to see you there, Charlie, is that, you know, for me, tikanga has to play a big part in that, fulfilling a need, a cultural need, whanaunatanga, manaakitanga. That is a real opportunity from where I sit in terms of trying to assist some of these people. So that might be one small way in which we can start moving them from where they are currently to where, as a society, we'd like them to be. But fundamentally, at the moment, they're there for a reason, and that's that they're fulfilling a need. Now, whether it's a financial need or whether it's a social need, gangs are fulfilling a need, and we need to provide an alternative as a community.
Clifford, don't sit down for too long now. I've got 3 questions here that we did receive that I'm going to ask one in between your questions. And I think you've really answered this one in the main, but can law enforcement agencies confirm what measures have been put in place to ensure the safety of our community? Currently, we still live on edge, waiting for the next incident to happen. I'm not just talking about extra police patrols, I mean removing the menace that is causing us to live in fear. Now, in part, ma'am, that's your question, but Clifford, I think you did address this earlier, but are there anything else you'd like to add about the measures that have been put in place and things that we should know and be aware of?
I think you probably would have noticed when I was speaking earlier is that I'm really mindful of not demonising our gangs or denigrating into name calling. And the reason for that, from my perspective, is that if you want to move people forward, you have to have a relationship. You have to be able to have a cup of tea. And at the end of the day, if you've got people's backs up, it makes it very, very difficult to move or shift people from where they are currently. So from my perspective, we should be treating them with respect as human beings, and making sure that we maintain relationships so we can actually try and move that forward. I don't believe you'll do that if you get people offside, and that's pretty much Leadership 101, is that it's far easier to take people with you when they're on board than it is if they're offside. Secondly, I'll just say that is that we don't get to choose who lives in our communities. We can, however, expect certain standards of behaviour. And it's up to us as a community, and it's very pleasing to see you all here now because you clearly believe that we need to have certain standards of behaviour. So as a community, as a police, it's about us trying to ensure we maintain those standards of behaviour. And collectively we can. You have a voice, and you can also report when things aren't the way they are or the way they should be. And it's our job to try and respond and to ensure we maintain those behavioural standards. But we have certain expectations in this community. That's what we're working towards, and I'm sure you do too. Thank you.
Another question. Yes, sir.
Is this going? Look, I spent a lot of time in Australia, and they managed to cut the gang problem back quite a lot. They banned patches in public. That was a good idea. So it was illegal to rear patches in public. And if you were a known associate of a gang, you couldn't associate with more than 2 others. So 3 gang members who were known associates could actually go together at one time. I went down to Himarana the other day with a friend of ours from South Africa, and there was a funeral out that way, and these gang members came past on their motorbikes. They rode on the centre line. They were really out of control. I've got to get dash cam of all the stuff, but they were it's intimidation, and they are into intimidation. Take away the patches, the intimidation disappears to a large extent. Can I just say to our policeman here, your reference to all of this as a business is somewhat offensive. A business is really something that's legitimate. Now, I think it'd be much better to refer to this as criminal activity. And to refer to it as a business gives it some legitimization. And I think that's wrong. I know it's a business for them, but you're wrong to refer to it, and you use the word business many times in your address, and I think that's absolutely wrong. It's a criminal activity, full stop.
Well, if I could come to Clifford's defence, if I may, the term business is purely one to understand why this is happening right now, right here. I think Clifford would be, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, the first to say that this is illegal activity. In fact, let's call it what it actually is. It's organised crime. That's what it is. And Clifford would be the first to say that. We've had many discussions on this over the last few weeks. Can I just say, and this is not in defence of anything that you're suggesting, because I'm sure many in this room would probably agree with what you're saying, sir. But in 2011, as you know, then Mayor, I think it was 2011, Michael Laws in Wanganui tried to get rid of gang patches, and it was deemed, he was sued by the Hells Angels, and they won under the Bill of Rights. So, you know, I don't know that we're going to go there, but what I do know is that you have an opportunity on Thursday next week, because the MP for Tauranga and Leader of the Opposition, Simon Bridges, is holding a meeting on Thursday, and I'm sure he can address those things for you. Right now, right here at local government level, this is all around kotahitanga and finding solutions for ourselves. We are going to, no doubt, absolutely going to have to link in with central government. And I should say that I made a call some time ago for the Minister of Police to surge appropriately trained police into Tauranga during this period, and that did happen. Now, whether it happened because I asked for it or not is irrelevant. It happened. It may have been happening anyway. So I think that we've been well served in that regard, but in terms of the issues that you're raising, these are central government issues, and I doubt that you'd get many arguments from some people in this room, but they are things that we are going to have to take to central government collectively. And a lot of what we're doing here, folks, is to raise an optic around the issues that we have here in Tauranga. Frankly, not that they don't know already, but to say, look, we're here ready to sort of speak about this at a national level. There will be other cities that face the same things. Napier, Wanganui, probably Christchurch at some stage. And you know, we need to be able to work together and collectively. But at the end of the day, we need a central government solution for this, and we need to have a voice, and we need to be part of it. Thank you for your question. Is there any other questions? Where are our mic team? Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Charles Harrison. Inspector Paxton, you're talking about trying to stem the influx of drugs. Surely it would be better to attack it from the demand side of things, because if there was no demand for those drugs, there would be no need for them bringing those drugs in. Over the last 2 years, I have seen a massive increase in the amount of petty crime, such as shoplifting and petty theft. Surely if a lot of that is to fund drug habits. Surely if we were able to attack that side of it and stop that money being so readily available, those drugs would not be in such great demand. Why can't we do it from that side? I mean, if we call for a police officer to attend for a serious shoplifting event, even we're talking $3,000–4,000 worth of stuff. Because of them being so tied up with other things, we're lucky if we see a police officer within a week. Why is that? Why can't we see them coming to deal with that sort of thing to try and stop the demand, rather than you trying to work down and trying to stop the influx of the drugs? If there's no demand, there's no need for the drugs.
Look, I think if I can understand your question, the demand's driven by the community. So at the end of the day, the community dictates the level of demand. The reason there's an ability to supply is because there's a demand. So yes, you can try and attack the demand, but I suggest the demand is a lot wider than perhaps what we think it is. So ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, there's a number of opportunities in relation to that, but they're probably more health-based opportunities if you want to deal with the demand. So, someone might comment on that.
I'll just read one more question. We've only got 3 here that I'll just intersperse while the mic, our friendly mic people are roving around. Clifford, I'm sorry, but this is mostly directed to you. Some feedback towards the police. As we live in one of the areas affected by the shootings, no communication has been given to neighbours after the event. The only way to understand what is going on by watching the media, which we understand, as we know is not always correct, what is the normal protocol in this situation, which is around comms?
I have to say it's a little hopeful sitting down because it looks like I'm going to be standing up for quite a while. But anyway, look, it really depends on what the nature of a neighbour is. If we're talking about an immediate neighbour, or we're talking about someone further down the road, or we're talking about people in the wider neighbourhood. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if someone is immediately affected by a particular incident, then they can expect a visit from us as part of those inquiries. And if it's a larger scale matter, then it's likely we'll be doing some area inquiries and contacting people through that means. Mainstream media, social media is some forms of communication that we use, as is community meetings like here tonight. But ultimately what I'd say to our communities, if they ever have any questions, is to go into their local station and speak to one of the community constables, and I'm sure they can point them in the right direction. At the end of the day, we don't always get it right. I know occasions where people are sitting there clearly concerned that they haven't had contact, so I'd certainly urge anyone in that situation to speak up, come forward and speak to our people at the station, or get hold of us through either 10-5 or through the email systems that we've got, and we'll certainly try and keep people informed.
Thank you, Clifford. And I will comment on that as well. I think in relation to the major motorway jam that we had the other day, following the police operation, I think we can do better. I'm talking about TCC now. I think we can absolutely do better to communicate with the police and say, you know, how long roughly do you think this might be closed? And I think we can do a lot better at communicating with our residents about those closures, and in fact putting up signage and diverting traffic probably a lot more proactively and probably a lot sooner than we could have done. So, you know, we accept responsibility for that as well, and as a consequence of what happened during those delays last week, we've already decided to be a bit more proactive about contacting the police when we know something's going on, asking how we can help and asking how we can support that operation so you are not as affected as we were the other day. Any more questions?
Kia ora
Margaret.
koutou.
Oh, sorry.
Over here at Temby. Dan Allen Gordon, I'm the Regional Manager for Graham Dingle Foundation. There was a talk about fulfilling needs. And the needs for our vulnerable young people is that they want good role models. And we need as many people in our community to be good role models and mentor our young people long term. So go and help organisations and make that happen, because that's why our young people are not getting their needs, and they just can be vulnerable and get into gangs. So, you know, in our program that has the most vulnerable young people, we have several that are managing, working, still at school, 11 at university this year, and that's because they had long-term mentors to help them. So that would fulfill a need for our young people if we had enough people stand up and help our young people in the community.
Thank you, Dan. Great to see you here. And can I commend the work? I met Dan last year, but the work that the Graham Dingle Foundation and many others are doing is really quite extraordinary, and you're quite right. That engagement, particularly with youth, with strong role models, be they male or female, is going to be very important going forward. Margaret, you had a question. Is there a mic that we can get down here for Margaret? Just there. Thank you.
Thank you. It's to Clifford, please. Clifford, knowing that in Australia, if people have lived there for 40 years but have never bothered to become Australian citizens, they are entitled to be thrown out of the country, which is why they're coming back here. Do we have the same policy in New Zealand? That's my first question. But the second question I want to ask is, follow on from Dan. We have, for example, terrible domestic violence in our society, particularly here in the Bay. And for the young children who are the victims of that domestic violence, it's a breeding ground to go into the gangs, is it not? And what can we do as people, as parents, as mums and dads, to actually help when you have a domestic violence situation? Is there any way that you can get volunteers to come into the community to work with those families on a one-to-one basis? I think they do it, Celia Lashley did it in her system, and we should be able to do it here. Can you help?
Thanks, Margaret. I don't think I can comment on the deportation policy of New Zealand, so I can't help you on that, sorry. Sorry, in relation to domestic violence, look, I guess the thing for me, coming back to our current situation, if we can talk about the current situation in relation to the violence of gangs in Western Bay of Plenty, I guess the biggest concern for me at the moment is in relation to those tamariki, rangatahi, the partners, the wives of gang members that are involved in these groups. They are the ones that I have real concern for at the moment. Now, suggesting that there's a direct link between domestic violence and entry into gangs, I'm not sure about that. from where I sit, the reason gangs exist is because they are disconnected from society. There's a lack of connection. That entity, the gang, is providing a connection for them, a means for being, and it's more than financial, it's also a sense of belonging. So, where I sit, as I said before, is that as a society we need to find some other way to provide them with a connection back to society in itself, because they're disconnected from society, antisocial behaviour, and we need to try and reconnect them into society so they can contribute and add value to our communities. That's where I sit.
Must be another question. Yes, ma'am.
Kia ora, Tenby. I'd just like to make a comment first that I was approached by an elderly Indian man who complained that drugs were being sold through some of these barber shops and hairdressing salons. And that's a result of immigration again. That's a result, as we can see through the newspaper reports, that students are coming into this nation, whether people like it or not, some, not all, but they are bringing in methamphetamine. And I'd like to ask a question too. Do the police and Tenby Power, are they aware that Jacinda Ardern is ushering in an American-style justice system where the police are able to hold their semi-automatic weapons and threaten our communities, because that's what we don't want? Thank you.
Thanks, Tauranga Maria. That's an interesting question. I don't think anybody wants to talk about police operations tonight or the weapons that they're holding, but I will go as far as to say they've been very effective in protecting us so far. So thanks for the question. Yes, sir. Sorry, I can't really see you here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Norman Sutton. Just talking to the subject of curbing demand, which is the obvious place to start. We have a government that is hell-bent, it seems, on liberalising our drug laws in this country. We're going to a referendum at the end of this year on legalising of marijuana, as we all know. I'd like to ask the question of the police commander and the health professional head of the DHB. What are their views on this liberalisation of marijuana? I mean, we're not talking about marijuana here. From overseas experience, it's actually big business, and it's actually highly processed form of marijuana, producing an element called THC, which is highly addictive and psychedelic. And it's creating mayhem in other countries where it's been tried out. And so I'd like them to state from their point of view, from a point of view of keeping the peace from the police, and also the health effects from the health professional, what's their personal view on whether this is a good idea or not for this nation? Thank you.
While Clifford and Simon may both want to ask that question, I need to inform you that they can't be drawn on anything political in that respect, in the positions that they're in, but they may want to answer some part of that, if you choose.
Look, the only thing I would say is that there's absolute merit in a health-based approach. So there's not one silver bullet for this problem. A health-based approach certainly has its place, as does the enforcement approaches we use in terms of sale and supply. So I don't think there's one size fits all. There's many different approaches, but certainly health-based approach in trying to address those that are using, trying to give them opportunities for a better life is an absolutely appropriate way to approach it.
Probably just to briefly add, the DHB board hasn't kind of formed a view on this yet. There's national discussion going on with district health boards on this topic. What I can say is we are concerned about the harmful effects of any drug, and if people get addicted to drugs and that becomes a problem with how they live their lives, then that's when the health system gets involved in providing care and support. So that would be my angle, regardless of what drug it is.
Just another question that we received. This is a timeline question. When can we expect to be able to live in peace, as we did prior to all this? My family and I are existing on very little sleep and are like zombies with the current situation. Now, I can tell you that I've had a number of similar communiques of that sort a lady said to me, every time a door slams, my nerves are on end and so forth. But Clifford, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, it's very hard to explain when this might end, and I do come back to the changing dynamics that we now have across New Zealand, but you may have a comment on that.
Look, I think the thing that I would say is that the tensions existed in this community for many, many years. I've been here for almost 8 years. For a large number of those years, there's been tensions in our community. The difference with this particular incident is that it's spilled over into the community. So for much of the time, there has been tension there. There's been growth of a number of our gangs. There's been various shows of force. But on this particular occasion, clearly violence has been used and it's been very, very overt. So it's spilled over into the community. Our community's been aware of it. But that tension has existed for a number of years. One would suggest it may continue for a number of years yet. As I said earlier, the thing from my perspective is that whilst there's always a risk for members of our community members of our community are not the focus of their attention. The attention is on the various parties that are involved in it. So I come back to those things that I said before, is that remain calm, remain vigilant, make sure you remove yourself from the situation and report what you see, and then we'll move forward from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Clifford. Are there any other questions, folks? Kia ora.
Kia ora no tātou. My name is Leon Samuels. I oversee the Man Up program here in Tauranga, Moana. I think, as we've heard tonight, there is no silver bullet to this whole, obviously, issues and problems going on within society. When you start to break it down or you start to pinpoint and say it's a gang problem, you start to shove that underground. So our point of view is this, is that, as I've heard earlier from the last speaker, is that unless you get to the ground level, it's where the mahi is done. And you got to get to a place where we're not, I suppose, standing behind the curtain and making point of views, but you got to get into where the issues are. You can come from I suppose, an academic perspective, but if you've lived it and you've come out of it, there's power there to be able to role model and change or be an example, as I've heard before. There's got to be examples. You can't just say that it's a gang problem. They've got to see there's an example that someone can come out of the gangs and be now a positive role model within society. So there is programs right now, and I think the greatest thing that we could do for society, our Tauranga Moana, I love my city, and I want to obviously be an impact of change, which is what we're doing, but we got to work together, as you were saying, Mayor, kotahitanga, and there are a lot of programs around that are doing that on the ground level. I believe change has got to come from the ground up, and it's happening, but I think if it's resourced and it's helped more, I think we can get a greater impact in this. And working one-on-one with whānau. Whānau is obviously the greatest impact that we want to do is change the man, you can change the home. Change a home, you can change a community. So, kia ora no tātou.
Kia ora, brilliant. And these are the pearls of wisdom, of course, that we all have here, all the answers here. Kia ora for that. It leads me to really talking, and I wasn't necessarily going to talk about this, but Clifford's been a great advisor on a number of areas to me in my very short tenure as mayor. As you know, or many of you may know, that Garry, Weber and I have formed a conjoint mayoral task force. The terms of reference are being scoped out right now on homelessness. And while this is a different subject, as Clifford said to me, at the end of the day, no matter what you do strategically, it's going to come down to one person on the street, and then another person, and then another person, and the families, most likely the families with whom they belong to. And here we are again, coming right back down to where the rubber meets the road on this issue, which is one individual person. I think that's a really insightful comment and very valuable for us to learn. It comes back to the fact that this is extremely resource intensive as a consequence of that, but that is where it's going to go. The mayoral task force, no matter how we couch it, no matter how many people are involved in it, no matter how much we ask for government help, it's going to come down here in Tauranga Moana to helping one person at one time to get into a home, that's for sure. Are there any more questions? Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm Craig Nees. I'm chairman of the Bay of Plenty Youth Development Trust. We run programs for at-risk youth, predominantly at-risk youth between the ages of 9 and 24. Some of those, we've got a new program starting this year which is for 16 to 24-year-olds that are not employed and they're not in education. What we see we have 150 to 160 young people come through our gym facility, which is a boxing-based organisation program, and a lot of those youths grow up in very dysfunctional families. They have no mentoring, they have no support, they have no finance. And of course, that's where a lot of our potential gang members come from. A lot of them live in gang environments. Very few of them will have more than 2 parents. Some of them will be brought up by grandmothers and solo parents. Now, Clifford is I agree, it's a business. There's lots of businesses. Some of them are illegal and some of them aren't. But it's a business. You buy and sell something, they make money. And I think our observation is that there's a sense of camaraderie in the gangs. There's a sense of belonging. There's income, and there's mana. And of course that's attractive for someone that has no other options. And I think discussions like this need to make us uncomfortable because nothing happens unless we get out there and do something. And we should all feel uncomfortable. I mean, gang members, as Clifford said again, are part of our society. And they're symptomatic of what's gone on in their previous life in most cases. Yes, there's evil buggers out there and what have you, but there's lots of people that don't fit our society. Some are in the gangs and some don't. But we know already that there's good people in the gangs. And you give them a clear pathway to better options, they'll take it. Not all of them, but a lot of them will. But, you know, we need to all work together to make it happen. You know, it's no good sitting in environments like this and just going round and round and round. Let's go and do something. You know, they're part of our society, all right? Thank you.
Thanks, Craig, and that's a really good point. And we're hoping that from this will come, you know, some actions that we can take to central government. We can't do this alone, we know that, but we can certainly make a big inroad into it here in Arohi, that's for sure. Are there any more questions, folks? So I can't quite see where we are. Just yell out. Is there? If somebody just wants to... yes, ma'am. Sorry, I can't see you.
Hello.
Thank you.
I think it's really great that we're getting more mental health buildings for those who need it. But I think maybe the government should put in more money to stay at the borders to stop all this drugs coming into New Zealand. If they stop them, then they couldn't sell them, can they?
Yeah, and I think, look, and there's arguments for both, right, the demand and the supply side. As I said earlier, on the demand side, there are programs that exist. We're going to get augmented here in the wider Bay of Plenty, Western and Eastern Bay, with mental health or facilities which have been funded by government, and that's fantastic. Education programs, a lot of what Craig's talked about, a lot of what Dan talked about earlier on from the Graham Dingle Foundation. Sir, I'm sorry I don't know your name, but what the issues that you talked about, these all make sense and they're all part of addressing the demand side. And I agree, we need to put resources into that. From my own perspective, I think that we will make greater inroads into the demand side if we really resource the supply side and stem the flow of meth. Very expensive, very resource intensive, but until we do that and work concurrently, supply and demand, I think we're going to be spinning our wheels for a while. And it's on that supply side that I've been sort of focused on my activities on the government to say we've got to find a way of stemming the flow of meth into New Zealand. I think there was a question down here somewhere. Is somebody up the top?
Oh, hello, everybody. And I fully agree with the gentleman over there, what he said. We are here to make a difference. I'm a coach, I'm a volunteer coach in the correction departments. And we really have to focus on the guys are in prison. They come out, 60% re-offenders. This is where we also have to put our action in. They need far more help. Help from the inside out. And this is what we all hear. We have to help them from the inside out. Why do they take drugs? Why do they join the gangs? Asking us all those questions, and I think the education, educate them, young ones in college, go in there, gang members go into colleges and educate them what the results are if you join a gang, if you start taking drugs. And I guess lots of mums or dads are here, their kids have been taking drugs or still taking drugs. We have to help from the inside out.
Thank you, ma'am. Don't disagree with that at all. And again, a good question to take to Simon next Thursday night. The yacht club's going to be full. We've got time for 2 more questions. Yes, ma'am.
Kia ora tātou. I'm Maria Hart. I'm a nurse and I work with the vulnerable families in their homes. The reason I was late was because I was at my niece's birthday. At that table there was a member of Fuwhiwhiu, member of Mongrel Mob and an ex-Black Power, all sitting at the same table sharing a meal. I encourage them to be here tonight, of course, but if they won't come into this environment. Somebody else was saying earlier, we need to be uncomfortable. These meetings should be held on a marae or in a gang patch or somewhere else, rather than this little safe place that we are here. Thank you. Somebody talked about, volunteers going in and working with the vulnerable families. There are organisations that go in and do that, but it needs to be people who are highly skilled, not people who want to do their best without any accountabilities to other organisations. We do know why people use drugs, why people commit violence, and a lot of it is to do with their exposure to the first 1,000 days in life, and it actually changes their chemicals in their brains, their DNA, and often these vulnerable parents are raising vulnerable children, so there's just no kind of, they need help and support and aroha right from the start, not judgment and not the stick and not you're a naughty parent, I'm going to take your child away. There's all those things that need to be really considered. Our DHB has strategies in place, and I think we need to start putting our money where our mouth is really, and I want to know what our DHB is going to be doing about that.
Can you just repeat that last question about, I just didn't hear the last bit.
The DHB has strategic priorities and working with vulnerable families, the first 1,000 days, Māori, mental health. There's one more, I can't remember, older people.
People with chronic mental health conditions. Fantastic. Yeah. I'm so pleased you've read that. Thank you.
Read it. Yeah, I live
I'm
it.
really proud of that. So, look, we've got, I guess, a whole range of programs around the first 1,000 days of life. So that's been something we've been looking at the last couple of years for exactly the reasons that you've said, is how do we make sure mamas and their babies have a great start in life. So that starts at from conception right through. So we're looking at those key life points in the first 1,000 days and what sort of supports need to be in place. So we're reorientating our health services around making sure there's good breastfeeding services, that children are getting immunised on time, that they've got warm, healthy homes, for example. So all of those different elements. But of course, again, it's bigger than the health system. We need to be working with other agencies around housing and employment and all the other things that make and support good parents.
Simon. We've got time for one more question. Yes, sir.
Here in the balcony.
Oh, I beg your pardon, sorry. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bobby.
Kia
I looked up why are we allowing this in our own country?
Sorry, I just missed the question a bit.
Why are we allowing this in our own country?
If you missed that, that was why are we allowing this in our own country?
Yeah, thank you. Well, this is why we're here. Thank you for the question, and this is why we're here to understand what is happening, this change in our own country. And you're right, sir, it is our own country, And it's not just here in Tauranga Moana or the Western Bay of Plenty. It's in the country, you're quite right. And this is what we're here to explore tonight. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask, well, okay, one more, because it was a very determined hand. Yes, sir.
Yeah, good evening. Firstly, thanks very much for staging the meeting, and thanks for everyone for coming. I think one of the points you're looking to find out is what can we as a community do? And we touched on a hell of a good points here tonight. We're a small group of community patrol people. We work in conjunction with the police, and of recent years now we've had a very good support from the council recognising the importance of people within the community working for the community, the eyes and ears for the police. The police need extra resources, as we've heard tonight. Everyone in this room is another resource. Let's see more volunteers around all these groups that are here doing their bit. Everyone does a little bit, we'll conquer this.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And as Clifford quite rightly said, we are all in this together, and the more that we work together, stick together, the greater the chance we've got of solving this problem. And of course, making sure that we are all safe together. I'm going to call on Mayor Garry Weber to close. Thank you, Garry.
Te nui te mihi kia koutou te hao kāinga, me ngā hapu o Tauranga Moana. Greetings to you all. Firstly, I think we've got to say to these men in blue, it's a thin line, but they have kept us safe, and we really appreciate what they've done. And in closing, I think that is our role, to support the police, to give the police the space to do their job. The new technology that's available for all of these people means the police have to get smarter and we have to find new solutions. I disagree with you about this being a business. It is a business. When we look at it, there is a spectrum of harmful substances. The most freely available is alcohol from supermarkets, liquor shops, and as Councillor Murray-Benj will tell you, she's been on council longer than I have, every time we do a local alcohol policy, people come out of the community and say, let them be. This is your community. We get overconfident that we can manage it. Unfortunately, we can't, and meth is just another part of the spectrum. And I think we have to take a long, hard look at ourselves, because big business runs the biggest harmful substance, and they come with lawyers and all sorts of people to defend why we should give them another licence. Those applications are there's free entry for the public, but it's deafening, the silence from the public. So, that's one thing you can do, because these applications are coming through all the time. But I think this is not the time for political point scoring. I personally would like to think that all parties get together and say, if we're going to do anything around this, finding solutions, it needs a bipartisan approach. And we need to accept that, like schools, we need more resources for these people. We're putting them in harm's way. We need to make sure that we're advocating at every opportunity to make sure that those politicians in Wellington understand they need more resource. And you've got the opportunity to talk to those people at any time. So in rounding out, thank you very much for coming along, but just remember, this is our community, the problem is in our community, and I think we need to take a long, hard look at ourselves. Are we as individuals great role models? Because if we are not, it's unfair to expect somebody else to change their ways and fix their problem if we're not prepared to be a good role model for our family, our community, and our district. Thanks for coming along. It's a difficult subject, but it's going to take all of us to work our way through it. Thanks very much.